Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affairs Analysis for 23rd June 2020, and these are the couple of articles we'll be dealing today. So the first article is taken from the Hindu and it is titled The Lone Wolf Threat. So this article is about the internal security aspect of radical terrorism, where a single person resorts to some sort of an attack because of various reasons. So, though this article refers to a particular knife attack that happened last year in London, or the shootings that happened in North Carolina, or the various incidences of hate crime that happened across the world because of any religious or any agenda based reasons, this article is about the understanding of the term lone wolf, which has been asked previously in mains as well. So we will go beyond this article and try to look at what a lone wolf attack means, what are the challenges that are faced in India with respect to this concept of lone wolf, what are the vulnerabilities or weaknesses of India's security system with respect to lone wolf, what are the steps taken by India. So basically, lone wolf attack means when a person is driven by an ideology or an idea, he wants to enforce that idea or force that idea upon other individuals through the use of violence or through the force of threat. So recently, UK had one such incident where a person killed 3 people in a knife attack. So this problem is not just specific to the UK as mentioned in the article, but we have also had various audio clippings which were circulated in social media in Kashmir, where Maulana Masood Azhar, a terrorist, is heard in various audio clippings exhorting Kashmiri youngsters to do their jihad or religious duty by rising up against India's move to abrogate Article 370. So this is a very important problem even in the context of Jammu and Kashmir, because we don't know which kind of a person would be instigating this violence based on his prejudice. So particularly in the context of jihadi terror, the potential for such attacks in various parts of the world is evident from the call given by the Islamic State or ISIS, encouraging its supporters and sympathizers who are not formally enlisted in their cadres. So ISIS has been time and again instigating its followers to undertake lone wolf strikes in order to uphold the religious ideology. Fortunately enough, India has been isolated from this phenomena until now, but the situation could however change as it is indicated by some distinct shifts in the nature of terrorist challenge confronting the Indian security system. So if we were to talk about the challenges that India is facing with respect to lone wolf attacks, unlike in the US where sophisticated weapons can be easily brought by ordinary citizens, gaining access to such weapons in India is very difficult. So only low quality country made weapons are available in India, and these are not ideally suited for lone wolf attacks. However, tracking even this low quality weapons has become a huge problem for our law enforcement agencies. Even though Indians have not displayed the psychological willingness to undertake this kind of lone wolf attacks, there has been incidences, especially a recent example wherein a Kerala youth was recruited by ISIS to carry out lone wolf attack. So over a period of time, the deployment of private security at high value targets is increasing. Now what if one of the radicalized youth is a part of that high value targets like malls, hotels, schools, and if he carries out a lone wolf attack, what is the kind of security apparatus we have in our country to stop it? That is the big question that has been bothering a lot of people. So there is this absence of past examples of lone wolf attacks, but there is a huge possibility of a potential lone wolf attack, and this is the biggest challenge that India is facing right now. So India's vulnerability is lying in the fact that there is a severe lack of police infrastructure, and as well as the capacity of police that are necessary for undertaking clinical operations to limit any sort of potential damage is very limited in our country. And secondly, the issue of population density, there is a heavy concentration of people in public areas, and this offers a potential ground for carrying out this kind of lone wolf attacks anywhere. So public places continue to remain very vulnerable. Thirdly, we have a very fast growing population, especially youth, with access to mass media and social media. They are very easy targets of radicalization. The next issue is very important because there is often a propaganda that there is a lot of communal tension in our society which tries to radicalize a particular segment of our country. So even this is a potential reason for carrying out lone wolf attacks by radicalized youth. So not just in India, if we take a look at the reasons and the trends across the world, the perception of global terrorism has undergone a massive makeover with the expansion of violent armed terror groups beyond the Middle East, and now we have them even in South Asia as well. So even these terror groups have now a global agenda but not just a regional agenda. State support has granted terrorist groups access to resources, guidance and logistics which made them even more powerful. Today, in countries like Afghanistan, a terrorist organization like Taliban is calling the shots. This shows how the dynamics of terrorism has changed in our world. So with respect to the steps taken by India, they include various arrangements like mutual legal assistance treaties to handle terrorist finance. We have set up joint working groups on counter-terrorism and security matters with key countries, and there have been substantial funds for police modernization programs. But still, the only thing that can stop this kind of lone wolf attacks is inter-country coordination as well as inter-agency coordination between countries. This coordination will ensure that there is a free flow of information, and only then we can have control over social media as well as every agent that can potentially radicalize the youth. That is the gist of this article. The next article for the day is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled Securing the Sea Lanes. So this article talks about how the South China Sea and various sea lanes are important for the issue of global commons and why South China Sea specifically matters for India. Historically, Indo-Pacific has always been a region which has been dominated by United States. So recently, the Prime Minister of Singapore, when he was addressing a press conference, was making a statement wherein he said that Indo-Pacific region and specifically Singapore now has to choose between a resident power. What he meant was USA, and he compared it with the challenge of reality at the doorstep, that is China. So what he meant was the countries in Indo-Pacific are now sandwiched between the tussle between USA and China, and they are forced to take sides. So in this kind of scenario, how do you ensure the sovereignty of all the countries that are present in this area? So basically, if you have to understand the reason why this Indo-Pacific region prospered because of the involvement of USA is not just because of the investments that it made. There is a blanket security cover that USA has ensured to all the countries all these years. So this enforcement of security regime has been USA's ultimate selling point, and that is why people or countries rather did not face any kind of threat or felt any sort of threat from USA, and they were able to indulge in trade freely. But with the rise of China and Chinese ambitions to express its hegemony in this area, the equations have shifted. Without realizing, many countries got into engagement with China, where the long-term strategy of China was to ensure that the debt-driven diplomacy keeps them under control of China. So this is the reality that the Prime Minister of Singapore was talking about with respect to various countries in ASEAN. Not just ASEAN, a lot of countries across the world are closely integrated with China because China literally became the factory of the world in the past few years. Now, one of the weakest points in the Chinese foreign policy is the sea lanes. China has to depend on Malacca Straits, which is a passage between Singapore, Malaysia, to pass through that area and ultimately reach China. So this has been one of the biggest problem for China. So across the Indian Ocean, China has been trying to exert its dominance and thereby control the sea lanes, which will ultimately control the trade. So it is all about power and it's all about money. So what is the role that India should play in this context and how to contain China? That is the agenda of this particular news item, to explain the concepts involved and also to explain the possible solutions. Let us understand the recent problem that this article is highlighting. So recently, Chinese maritime research and development vessels entered into exclusive economic zone of India without consent. So India has a law which says that if any country or organization wants to undertake research in our waters, they have to take permission from India. But Chinese did not do that. They just entered into our exclusive economic zone and started to understand the crucial oceanographic data such as subsea and seabed conditions. So the claim made by China in this context is the fact that they are using this research for global purposes, that is global commons. But we very well know that China has been having a history wherein they use this research data for their own military and navy purpose. So this has been a cause of concern and issue raised by India. So if we put things into perspective, there is an initiative called Asian Maritime Transparency Initiative. So basically the purpose of this initiative is to ensure that any research that happens, the data should be presented to all the countries involved. Now in the last 1 year, that is between April 2019 to March 2020, China has taken 25 such maritime surveys, but the other 6 countries who are involved in this region did not cumulatively do so many missions. So this shows that China is having ulterior motives. Even earlier this year, Australia raised a concern over the activities of Chinese vessels in its waters. Similarly, when we talk about Africa, there is this Horn of Africa, and there is a country called Djibouti. So China established a logistic base in Djibouti, but no country any longer accepts China's claim that Djibouti is just a logistic facility. So there have been doubts expressed by a lot of countries that China is using even African logistic bases as a secretive base to carry out intelligence activities. So there is also a concern that secret deals were made between China and Cambodia as well. So if this report is accurate, China is one step closer to our shores, that is India, because from Cambodia we can easily have access to a lot of intelligence information because of the proximity to Indian vessels there. China very smartly uses an international law wherein there is this law of sea convention by UN, which that is UN clause. It says that there is one clause which says that right to innocent passage is given to any country as long as they do not do anything that is disturbing the peace and order in that coastal state. So without doing much, the ships pass through international waters and gather intelligence. so that they are ready for any sort of unwarranted events in the future and also impose their hegemony. So, given all these problems, the important point that we have to focus and the key takeaway from this article is the concept of underwater domain awareness. So, we can definitely predict the entry of these survey vessels before they enter into our exclusive economic zone. So, in order to do that, there should be interagency coordination and a solid underwater domain awareness. In order to have this awareness, we have to collaborate not just with the security agencies and navy within the country, but also with various other countries which have common interests. That is, all the Southeast Asian region and USA together should come together to ensure that China does not exhibit this tendency of aggressive surveillance. The author also highlights that there is not much time left, because if we continue to delay this process, China will be gaining more and more control over the entire Indo-Pacific region as well as Indian Ocean region. That is the gist of this article. Please note this term, underwater domain awareness.